Hi, everyone. This is Bob Dietrich on another episode of the ADHD Toolbox. And today I have a very special guest named Caroline Maguire. Carolyn, welcome to our show.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Now, you're going to be excited to meet Carolyn because she has got a lot of good information, something we haven't really talked about on the program yet, which is social skills. And how do you develop or help your children develop social skills, help your teens develop social skills, or even if you're an adult and you feel like you could really improve your social skills, you have ADHD, how do you improve those? And we're going to talk about those strategies today. Carolyn is the author of a new book that's come out, which is Why Will No One Play With Me? Obviously, talking about social skills and social environment. She also wrote the curriculum for the ADHD Coach Academy for their program, The Fundamentals of ADHD Coaching for Families. So, Carolyn, we're super excited to have you here. And I really want to dig in to the social thing while we have time, because we're going to talk a lot about it this whole 30, 40 minutes that we're going to be on the show. And I want to start by asking about social skills. Why is it that people with ADHD have social challenges?
So I think there's a few factors. One is our executive function, which is the management system of the brain, and the ADHD challenges we experience. Actually, all of those brain-based things drive social skills. So self-regulation, attention, noticing, when you have trouble with memory, and emotional regulation, having too big a reaction to people, right? So all of those things affect us, and what we find is that a lot of kids with ADHD, teenagers, adults, we have a struggle socially that goes back to sort of those ADHD challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've also noticed a theme in talking with some of the doctors in our show that a lot of ADHD children, especially, will develop a little slower, right? And so they may be a couple years behind, and so they may not get some of the social cues that are available at the age that they're at, because they may be a few years behind. Is that a factor in the social issue as well?
Absolutely. So maturity is a huge factor. So just two quick examples. If a kid is a little too silly and a little too goofy when his peers have sort of, tamed things down, maybe they're not as jokey, they don't have that same sense of humor, then you see social challenges, right? If someone is immature and not necessarily interested in the same thing as your peers, you see the challenge. And then also, just managing everything, right? Social takes actual, work, and you have to focus on it. And so a lot of times ADHD kids are so overwhelmed by just school that
Mm-hmm.
they just don't have the wherewithal to put on being social, reaching out, texting friends. And so that affects them. So maturity is a huge factor here.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Well, let's talk about some of the solutions around social development and social skills that you can help, because you work. I understand you work with children, but you also teach the parents. And if you're a teacher, you teach teachers as well on how to work with the children to go through this, right?
Absolutely. So one of my passions is teaching parents how to coach their child, and that's really the basis of Why Will No One Play With Me, because as parents, we have to reinforce we're there day in and day out, and we have a real opportunity to bring this social learning into daily life. And then teachers are so busy, but they still do have the opportunity to infuse their classroom with more social learning. And I love training teachers and working with schools to help to make that possible.
Yeah, I mean the parents so need the support one on one, but when and when you train the teachers, teachers get to use this on like 20 or 30 kids or more, and so they really can have a big effect on a lot of kids at the same time. So I love working with teachers in that way as well, because we can make such a bigger impact. But the parents need the support. So I'm glad you're writing these books and this curriculum, because everybody gets your help and expertise. Um, so, the first thing we'll talk about is children and teenagers that often have social challenges. You say that they require direct instruction to teach skills to improve to improve that social approach or whatever. Can you expand on that a little bit and explain that?
Yeah, absolutely. I really believe that if kids, could do well, they would do well. And I think a lot of times we wait and see if things will improve. But because of the ADHD challenges, most kids with ADHD don't just get better at social. We have to directly teach them and help them with the skills so that they can really do what they want socially. So I think it's important to know that waiting isn't necessarily going to bear fruit, and also that I think these kids really want to do well. It's just hard for them.
Right. And so they have a desire to do well, and in fact, they want to be more social. And the cool thing is that when you look at celebrities nowadays, like Adam Levine, for example, Maroon 5, he's on The Voice, he's organizing that whole thing, has ADHD, and he seems like one of the most social people that you'll meet. So you can see that getting through these challenges and getting on the other side, so you're more extroverted and more social, is totally possible.
Absolutely. This is all totally possible, and I think that parents are just desperate for the information, as well as ADHD adults, to try to make sure that their child has really good social skills so that they can thrive, because that's what we want.
Okay, so you say that parents can help their child improve their skills through coaching, through your coaching technique, which allows the parents to engage a collaborative conversation. Can you explain what those, how your technique works to create those collaborative conversations and help with that social communication?
Absolutely. So, a lot of times as parents, we fall into the trap of telling because we're so frustrated and we forget to ask for the child's perspective. So, coaching uses open ended questions like what or how, and another technique called reflective listening, where we just recap what the child says. And this really helps with us hearing their perspective and doing some social problem solving. It helps us talk about social because it's a tough thing to talk about. And a lot of times as parents, we kind of fumble because the kid is not eager to talk about this tough subject. And you can use this technique for anything you want to talk about. And the idea here is that instead of saying, you were really rude yesterday, you didn't, stop and pause and say thank you, you would ask the child, like, what went on for you yesterday? What makes that hard? And then they give you the information, and then you have an actual back and forth conversation so that they feel heard. But also, a really cool thing happens where when you talk about something, you reflect on it, it actually makes you think about it more. And so they're going to become more involved, and it also builds their self-talk so that they have a better chance of having that little angel on their shoulder that will say, hey, I want to remember to be polite even when I don't feel like being polite. So the coaching technique has some real benefits.
Yeah, it sounds like you go from this authoritarian conversation and being this kind of dominant parent to almost being like an interviewer, right? Like you're interviewing the child, asking questions, or like a journalist approach, and in that process, you gain back and forth communication. You gain the knowledge of understanding where they're coming from, and they are more open to having that conversation. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Does that kind of feel right?
Absolutely, because if you think about it, we as parents sometimes presume we know why things are happening. We assume we know why a kid is fighting us on homework, or why they are not turning something in, or why they haven't, started a project, or why they aren't going to the cafeteria and mixing in with other kids. But one of the things that the coaching technique does is it allows you as a parent to really think about and ask the child, and we get a ton of information, and therefore we come to find out what they're thinking, and it actually gives us more of an opportunity to help them reflect and then to influence them, because they're not as shut down as if we tell them and then they tend to shut down and they're not listening to us. And so we're kind of making no ground. So that's one of the big bases of why I would know and play with me is this coaching technique.
Wow, that's great. And it sounds like teachers can use this same exact way, right? Same thing, same exact instruction for teachers.
Absolutely. So one of the things I always tell teachers is that during the day, when social conflicts come up or when a kid is resisting something, we can ask them the simplest question in the world: how come? And then the child gives you information, and then you are able to also get them to think of things. You can also ask them questions about things like other people's feelings. Let's step into their shoes. What do they feel? What are you expected to do as a learner? And let's get the kid to reflect and think about their social role, their learning role, rather than just telling them and assuming they know.
Got it. Got it. So let's say you're an adult, because we have parents and teachers viewing these videos, these instructional videos in the ADHD Toolbox. But we also have adults with ADHD, and they're looking for solutions for themselves. How would they use this technique similar to this to have to create similar results?
So with adults, I think it's important that we develop sort of that self-talk. So, you wouldn't be engaged in a dialogue as much as when you are trying to change your social approach and develop a different kind of social skills. Every time I always say you enter a door, you want to think about what is your mission, what's your intention, and to have that self-talk where you say to yourself, what is it that I'm trying to do? Okay, I'm trying to not overshare so much. Or, when my boss says something that infuriates me, I'm trying to keep calm more and, work on this self-regulation, calming strategies I've learned. And so with adults, we don't necessarily have the same conversations, although the technique does work on bosses, mother-in-laws, other people. So it may help you out get further communication-wise, but we have more that internal self-talk we need to develop so that we remember our intentions.
Okay. So with regard to that self-talk, is it kind of like the cheerleader self-talk, or is it just a reminder, stay focused on the mission, stay focused on the mission?
Well, I would hope it's both. A lot of times we pay attention to what is negative. And so I definitely know as ADHD adults, we have to focus a lot on not listening to that negative voice. But we want to have that cheerleader voice, or that voice that recognizes when we're doing something well. And also that voice that says, this is my intention, or I'm going to filter here, and kind of guide you. Your self-talk is your rudder. So it allows you to self-regulate more. But I really hope people have an inner cheerleader and not that negative self-talk we often are plagued by as ADHD adults.
Yeah, I thought that was just because I was a Virgo, but I guess
No.
be different. All right. So I guess the first step, and I come from a personal growth space, so I know the first step is awareness, right? Become first aware of what's happening. And so I would imagine this is no different. Become aware of the self-talk that's already going on, right? And a lot of times, especially with people with ADHD, the talk will be negative, and you first notice that it's negative, and then shift the self-talk. Do you have any techniques of how to shift the self-talk?
I do. There was a famous study where a doctor put people in front of a mirror for 15 minutes a day. And what ended up happening was people who had totally positive views of self spent so much time looking at themselves every day, and he didn't mean this to happen, that they became really negative. And so one of the things I would say to ADHD adults that we know is that we kind of default to these negative thoughts. So if we can spend time on mindfulness, thinking these positive thoughts, if we can have an alternate thought to the negative, when we think a negative thought, if we can have something geared up that we're ready to say to ourselves, it's more positive and more compassionate, That's one way. The other thing is there evidence? You know, a lot of times we ruminate and we get into these cycles and we think these catastrophizing things or these negative things, and there is no evidence. You know, I talked to you and I'm assuming that you had no interest in what I had to say, except, is there evidence? Did you walk away? Did you shrug? Did you roll your eyes? No? Then I'm creating a story for myself. So that's part of it, is to look at those stories and see if there's any evidence, because I'm going to make a bet most of the time there's not.
Right. And so awesome for adults, right? And then let's go back to the kids, especially teenagers, right? And the teenagers will come back with these big elaborate stories of how they got bullied at school and things like that. We were talking to Tamara Rosier with one of the coaching companies here recently, I think ACO, ADHD Coaching Association, and she was talking about bullying versus badgering, and how, you know, there's a big difference between the two, right? And that kids sometimes feel like they're getting bullied, but they're really just getting badgered, you know, it's getting teased or whatever. And it wasn't that big of a deal, but they come home and they got this big elaborate story about what happened, and that they got bullied and that didn't happen. So do you have a technique on how parents can work with those stories and help, you know, was there evidence? What really happened? Can we reframe the story, and can you get through this? Do you have a technique for that you use with parents and teachers?
I actually absolutely do. So literally the first chapter of Why Will No One Play With Me is about the stories we tell ourselves. Partly because a lot of kids, because they've been beaten down and things haven't gone their way and they're not sure why friendship hasn't gone well, they develop stories. And the story could be, smart kids don't have friends, or I'll have friends when I'm older, or, you know, everybody's just mean. And so one of the things parents end up needing to do with kids of all ages is to help the child look at that story. And it could be the bullying story you're referring to. It could be the negative self-talk we're referring to. But one of the best ways is this coaching technique, is to ask about the story. Tell me more about that. What makes you say that? And just to ask them about it. Because what ends up happening is, if they're staunch in their position, like smart kids don't have friends, so it's fine, I never socialize, you know, only you think it's a problem, Mom. I think it's really important for them to have that reflection, because a lot of times then they start to say, oh, well, I didn't mean to be so vehement about it, or they start to look at it. And it goes back to that, is there evidence? The more we look at something, the more we can process those emotions and move past it. And in terms of bullying, there are kids who are bullied terribly, but there are also kids who develop a story that someone doesn't like them, and it's based on no evidence whatsoever.
Right, right. So great. There you have it. You have a technique for adults on how to get through that, the self-talk and the story, but you also have that technique for the children as well. And it's the first story in your book, so that's fantastic.
Yeah.
So you say, you also say that the first step to social change, to all social change, is, or for the child or teen, is to become a better social noticer. So what is a social noticer, and then how do you become better at being a social noticer?
So I would say it's true for everyone. I would say even adults. So one of the things that is sort of true is that when people struggle socially, whether it's that they don't pause to pay attention, or it's that they don't read social cues well, a lot of times we with ADHD don't really notice things. Whether it's that we're in our own head, or it's self-regulation, whatever the reason, we don't notice. And so examples of noticing are, when you are in a conversation with someone, you have to read their cues, you have to read their energy and their mood, and you have to think about the context of the situation. You know, they just got bad news, I have good news, but I need to check that good news a little bit because they're feeling bad. And so one of the things I like to do with kids, teens, adults, everybody, is help us to become better social noticers because it helps us on all fronts.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I've noticed that ADHD seems to create a more self-aware, you're like hyper aware of yourself. And so when you're excited about something, you'll be hyper aware, but like, I want to share this. And without being aware that, hey, something tragic just happened to this other person, or maybe even just emotional, maybe, or maybe they're crying, or maybe something's going on, and I'm trying to share this major thing, and I'm not even aware of the other person on the other side, what they're going through. So it sounds like you're saying, hey, notice your environment first, notice the other people and what's going on, and then come in with what you want to contribute. Is that kind of what you're talking about?
Absolutely. And also, when we're in a conversation with someone, a lot of times one of the ADHD challenges is that we overshare or we keep talking about something they're not interested in. Then we beat ourselves up with these stories after, right? And we go into a ruminative cycle. So becoming a better noticer is going to help you in that situation. It's going to help you figure out what your boss wants and what motivates him and how can you talk to him. It's going to allow you to figure out how to be with other kids and be a little bit more able to fit into what they want to play. So it's all around a good thing, but it starts because of those ADHD challenges with the fact that we don't notice as much and the need to build that muscle.
Got it. And you call this the social spy, and why do you refer to it as that?
So what I do with people of all ages is that they learn to spy. And so what that means is they'll notice and watch without directly watching. So, a kid will rehearse with me that they go to school and they're in the cafeteria eating their food, or they're in the hallway getting their books from their locker. And while they're doing that, they have a mission. And the mission is maybe to listen to what other kids are talking about so they can fit in more with conversations, or noticing how much do kids share in the cafeteria? What do they hold back? And so we'll have them go to school with a specific mission to spy. You can also use this as parents to go to parties, malls, food courts, and have them actually, with a mission, read people's body language, notice people's energy. I'll have them pick out 2 characteristics. When your teacher is frustrated and when they are anxious, what do they do with their body and their voice? What do they say? Go spy on that at school for every teacher and then come and report back. And what it does is it heightens their awareness of other people, their feelings, their inner emotional world. It also gives you data so
Right.
that when your teacher is starting to get angry and annoyed with you, you don't keep going. Oh, these are the signs, and you retreat a little bit and wait for the teacher to calm down or to, let the teacher speak and be heard.
Wow, that's awesome. Now, does your book, No One Will Play With Me, talk about the social spying and um, the first step to social challenge, being a better social noticer?
It absolutely does. So Why Will No One Play With Me talks about all of this spying and has a series of exercises that people can follow to become a social spy. And I would say too, teachers can use these exercises as well, because one of the things I know about teachers and when I've worked with them is that one of their challenges is ADHD kids, sometimes teachers will write the assignment right on the board, and we as ADHD people do not even notice it. So a spy activity could be that the kid notices what are the things that follow and precede you writing something down for homework. What's your pattern? Spy on that and report back. The teacher could even use that in the classroom.
Awesome. Fantastic. Is there something in your book that you felt was your favorite part or most effective part of the book?
I think the most effective thing that is out there is really this reading the room lessons. So within Why Will No One Play With Me, there's a series of lessons to teach anyone. I mean, I use it with adults to read the room. And they're fun, they're interactive, they bring you into the community, you spy, you notice, And it's nothing anyone's ever created before. We talk about reading the room, but no one's ever given a complete lesson track. And the reason I did it was because I found that, otherwise people talk about, as an ADHD adult or teen or kid, you need to read the room, but you don't know how. If you did know how, you would be reading the room. So that's the most proud thing, and why will no one play with me, I think, is those kind of lessons that are very interactive and fun.
All right. And we got a little bit of time, so I'm going to put you on the spot. I'm going to ask you, can you give us one technique of reading the room that somebody could like use in the next room they walk into? Like
Yes. Yes. So two or three things. One, you enter a space, you exit the door of your car, you're starting to think about, I'm going to read the room, and I'm going to pause, and I'm going to notice.
Okay.
Two, whenever you enter a space, a conversation, or a situation, there are past experiences you have that you can call up. And we don't always do this as ADHD people. So I call that like this, not that. So you're going to start by thinking, how is this similar or different to past experiences? So that, if you're entering a huge sales meeting as an ADHD adult, if you've been in one before, that's going to help you know what to do. What is it that I'm expected to do?
Mm-hmm.
And the last thing is that if you need a little thing to remember and think, I call it mind your P's and Q's. So people, environment, actions, similarities. So when you're looking at people and you're in that situation, just think mind your P's and Q's. It's something my Nana used to say. And what it means is like notice the people and the environment and their actions, and that will tell you what you're expected to do. And all you have to do is pause for like 5 seconds and do that. And by the way, no one will notice those 5 seconds. We worry about that. No one will notice. Try it. I bet you no one will notice.
Love it. Awesome. Well, it'd be really cool if we had some kind of handout or ebook or something that talked about the top 10 social skills that you had. Do you have anything like that you can give us?
I do. So I have 10 ways to teach social skills in daily life ebook for anyone who's part of this summit, and you can download it. And what it does is it gives you how to practice any social skill in daily life, so that we don't like to do things that don't benefit us, right? It's boring. So this will allow you to practice in daily life, and you can use these suggestions at any age. Because I think it's the most fun to do things, that are kind of like a game in daily life.
Got it. So the link to that ebook is on this page, as well as a link to Caroline's website and an email. So if you have any questions, you can send an email over to Caroline, and she can answer those questions for you. And you can also order your book, and we're going to put a link to the book on the website as well, on this page as well. And you can find your book. Is it on Amazon, or where do we find that?
It's on Amazon, Why Will No One Play With Me, as well as if you just go to playbetterplan.com or CarolineMaguireAuthor.com. It's there as well.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much. This has really been an enlightening conversation, and people can go so much deeper by reading your book, because you've got, a couple hundred pages, I would imagine, of information and skills and techniques to not only help yourself become a better social communicator, but also to help your children. And it's so important to help them become more social at a young age, because they can take that into adulthood and become just that much more effective.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. And thank you all for watching this episode of the ADHD Toolbox. I think it was very enlightening, and we're honored to have Caroline here guiding us through it. So thank you.